Подчеркну, наша страна всегда уделяла и будет уделять первостепенное внимание сотрудничеству с африканскими государствами. Не будет преувеличением сказать, что это один из неизменных приоритетов российской внешней политики. Если мы все-таки примем решение не продлять эту сделку через 60 суток, то мы готовы весь тот объем, который был направлен за предыдущее время в особо нуждающиеся страны Африки, поставить из России в эти страны.
Vladimir Putin has written off $23 billion of debt burden from African countries. Yes, you heard right, $23 billion written off by Vladimir Putin. This is debt that African nations owe to Russia. They recently attended a summit in Russia to discuss various issues, including their national debts. At the summit, Putin told them, you can forget about it, invest whatever money you have in your countries, your infrastructure, and make your lives better. That's what I want to see. The reality is that many African countries are deeply in debt. We owe a lot of money to the World Bank and the IMF. I don't really know why, but we do. Supposedly, in 2010, sub-Saharan African countries had a total debt of around $305 billion. The region now has more debt than it can realistically pay. Some of the most indebted countries include Angola, Djibouti, Mozambique, Rwanda, Sudan, Tanzania, Zambia, Cabo Verde, Mauritius, and Seychelles. These countries owe more money to international lenders than they can afford to repay. The problem is that when these entities lend you money for infrastructure or development, they expect repayment with interest. If you cannot pay, they come into your country and claim assets. They can take minerals, gold, lithium, uranium, or diamonds. It's okay to borrow money to develop your country, but you must be prepared to pay it back. Unfortunately, the way these loans are structured makes it nearly impossible to fully repay them, leaving many nations stranded. But Russia, you owe me $23 billion. You can keep it. At the summit, Putin also stated that Russia supports expanding the representation of African countries in the United Nations Security Council and other UN structures. Currently, the UN Security Council consists of 5 permanent members, countries that essentially gave themselves power: the United States, France, Great Britain, China, and Russia. These 5 nations make major decisions, such as whether a country should be bombed. Other countries have no real influence. They are merely spectators with no real power. African leaders, including former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, have questioned why African nations cannot have a seat at the Security Council. Russia has been advocating for Africa's inclusion, but why do we need to be accepted? Are we not human enough? What more must we do to be respected?
Having and bearing sanctions banning us from Europe, we are not Europeans. We have not asked for any inch of Europe, or any square inch of that territory. So, Blair, keep your England and let me keep my Zimbabwe.
Russia and Africa aim to develop cooperation in all areas and strengthen an honest, open, and constructive partnership. A partnership should be equal, not one side acting as the boss dictating what the other must do. According to Putin, reopening embassies in Burkina Faso and Equatorial Guinea will be beneficial. Previously, these embassies were closed because the leaders of those countries at the time were pro-West and did not favor relations with Russia. Their closure significantly impacted trade between Russia and these nations. Putin stated that sovereignty is not a one-time achievement. It must be constantly protected. Is he right or wrong? Sovereignty is not something you achieve once and then take for granted. Even after gaining independence, there will always be forces trying to bring you back under their control. True freedom must be continuously defended.
В значительной степени тот уровень благосостояния, который достигнут в бывших колониальных державах, он основан на ограблении Африки. Это всем известно хорошо. Да, собственно, исследователи в той же самой Европе этого и не скрывают. Так и есть. Они говорят, на горе и страданиях африканских народов построено в значительной степени, не говорю целиком и полностью, нет, но в значительной степени благополучие колониальных держав. Это очевидный факт. Ограбление, работорговля, конечно.
Putin also offered assistance to African nations in countering threats such as terrorism, piracy, and transnational crime. He stated that Russia would continue training personnel from African countries to handle these threats. While it is beneficial to receive help against terrorism, such support must be well structured. If a foreign force is coming for a limited time, say from the 1st to the 30th of a month, then they should leave when the contract ends and reapply if needed. The issue arises when foreign powers come and decide to stay indefinitely, turning into occupiers. We do not want to be slaves of the East. Just as we do not want to be slaves of the West, we want freedom. We want to work with partners who genuinely help us move forward, partners who are transparent and committed to our progress. But we do not want to be dependent on any single power. Putin also announced that Moscow will allocate an additional $90 million for development in Africa. Is this a good thing? Yes, but should we depend on it? Absolutely not. Africans must stop being beggars. We appreciate financial support, but history has shown that such funds are often misused. Corrupt leaders take the money meant for hospitals and roads and use it for personal gain. They might start a road project but never finish it, enriching themselves instead. Africa does not need donations. What we need is honesty in trade, fair value in our exports, and visionary leadership. Russia is offering assistance to African nations, which is an interesting development. According to Burkina Faso's interim president Ibrahim Traoré, Russia's President Vladimir Putin is willing to provide weapons free of charge to African nations. In a conversation with Sputnik on Monday, TR discussed the support received from Russia, emphasizing that Putin was extremely generous and offered unrestricted assistance in supplying the necessary weaponry to combat terrorism in the African nation. It's good to see that he says there are no restrictions. They do not refuse licenses to us, and it is at a good price. Russia is also ready to deliver weapons to us for free, so you buy the weapons. Obviously, Mr. TR is a soldier. You know, he thinks a lot about weapons, and obviously Africa needs weapons to defend itself. Again, guys, it's good to see Russia coming forward with an offer saying, we're going to erase your $23 billion debt, no need to pay us anymore. It's a good thing because most of the time the Chinese don't do that. The Chinese give you stuff, you build your stuff, you do your project. If you're not able to finish your project, you still need to pay the money. If you don't pay the money, they're going to take the port. They don't play like they took the port in Asia, the same thing they tried to do in Tanzania. They had a project to build the port with Tanzania. Tanzania was not able to pay the money, and the Chinese almost took the port. They were lucky because at the time, President Maggi did not allow it. But Russia comes forward and says, you know what? Keep the $23 billion. We know African countries owe a lot of money to the World Bank. Who owns the World Bank? Who owns the World Bank? That's a big question. How can a bunch of individuals have more money than countries? What kind of society do we live in? Why don't people ask the right questions? Countries have no money. They have to borrow from some entity named the World Bank. Who owns the World Bank? Who creates the money from the World Bank that you all need to build your countries, your roads, your hospitals and stuff? You must ask the right questions. Why do they have the right to print that money and give it value while we don't have the right to do it in our own countries? It doesn't make any sense. In addition to these overtures, one must consider the broader implications of such debt relief on the geopolitical landscape. By erasing this debt, Russia is not only alleviating immediate financial burdens, but also sending a strong signal to the world. Alternative models of international relations exist beyond the traditional Western-dominated institutions. This gesture challenges the status quo and invites African nations to reassess their long-standing reliance on institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, which often impose strict conditions that do not always serve local interests.
We need a financial transaction tax at a global level where even countries like Kenya pay. We do not want anything for free. You will pay more eventually because you have a bigger economy. We will pay commensurate to our economy. And we want those resources controlled not by IMF and World Bank. Because IMF and World Bank, you have the final say. We don't have no say. We want another organization of equals, where you have as much say because you pay, as much as we do because we also pay. That's the organization we are looking for. And that is why we are saying we need a new financial architecture where governance, where power is not on the hands of a few people. We can agree on the governance of the institution. We can agree on the sharing of power so that all of us have access to resources that go to making sure, number one, renewable energy. We invest in decarbonization. Number 2, adaptation, mitigation, smart agriculture. Number 3, restoring our planet, restoring our biodiversity, and making sure our carbon sinks work. This is what we are saying, and we would appreciate a little understanding. And we want to be, we are talking the normal. If we continue talking the normal, Emmanuel, we will never solve this problem. Things are not going forward, they're going backwards. Tokenism, installment will not solve this problem. We have a much bigger problem than the installment we are discussing here will solve. You are not hearing us. I will.
This development raises critical questions about Africa's future trajectory. With the $23 billion debt erased, African leaders now face a choice. Channel these freed resources into sustainable infrastructure, education, healthcare, and technological innovation, or risk falling into another form of dependency by aligning too closely with any single external power. The key will be ensuring that these financial benefits lead to genuine progress for the people. If the funds are managed transparently and invested wisely, this could be the catalyst for a renewed era of economic independence and self-determination on the continent. Furthermore, the summit has sparked broader conversations about fairness in international finance and the balance of global power. Many African leaders view Russia's move as an acknowledgement of past inequities and an invitation to build more equitable partnerships. They are pushing for a reformed global order where decisions, especially those affecting peace and security, reflect the interests of all nations, not just a privileged few. This dialogue is essential if Africa is to transition from being viewed as a debtor region to a key player in shaping global economic and political norms. Ultimately, while Putin's cancellation of $23 billion in debt might seem like a generous handout, it carries deeper implications for sovereignty, self-governance, and a reimagined role for Africa on the world stage. The coming months will reveal whether this gesture translates into lasting empowerment or simply shifts the balance of influence. Okay guys, thank you very much for being part of this. I appreciate you. Let me know how you feel about this. I know there are a lot of intelligent people here who understand economics and many other things. Don't get scared away. Let us know how you feel. How can Africa progress? Can we build Africa with donations? It's always European countries giving to Africa. It's always America giving to Africa, and now Russia giving to Africa. But we all know that Africa has the most richest in the world. How come we have the most riches, the most gold, the most lithium, the most uranium, the most diamonds, but we are the ones that have to beg? Does it make any sense? Is Russia better than the West? Big question. I want to know from you, should we be afraid and stay on our guard and remain free forever? God bless.